Well. Wait for the other guys to sit down. Well, welcome back, everyone. Thanks for coming. Hope you had a coffee because we're going to talk about law again. So, firstly, let me say hi to Renata. Como você está? Tudo bem?
Everything's fine. Tudo bem, Fábio? Hi.
Can't hear her.
Yeah.
I can't hear her.
Yeah.
Speak up.
Yes,
Not-
speak a little bit louder, Flavio.
Speak up.
Can you
Hola.
listen to me?
Yes. Now we can.
Great.
So, thanks for joining us out there from Brazil, and prazer conhecê-la. So, as you can see, I'm a Brazilian as well, but I've been in Barcelona for the last 30 years. I was independent before, and I would like to introduce or ask to tell who they are, this incredible panel that we have over here with Hika. I don't want to mistake your surname, Kurt Dayan.
It's not an easy name to pronounce.
Not at
Thank
all.
you. Happy to be in Barcelona. Was hoping for a bit more sun, but nonetheless, thank you, Democracy for All, for having me. It's a pleasure to be on the stage. I'm based in New York. I run a law practice in New York focused on blockchain. I separately consult protocol sponsors, dApps, DAOs on regulatory strategy. Definitely a very eventful space these days.
Yep. I can see your name, Michael.
Michael.
Pachi.
Yeah, that's also quite a difficult name to pronounce. So I'm Michael. I work currently as the Deputy Minister of Justice for a state called Liberland, which is a state which will run on blockchain, and we're building that blockchain. And we're creating the decentralized autonomous governance system of that state. So that's also exciting. Besides that, I'm working as a judicial professional for compliance for a a bank, basically.
And here we got Joaquin, good friend and long time person in the space here, please.
Thanks, Flavio. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Democracy for All. Thanks to the Canberra for this beautiful building. Well, I'm an associate on the banking and finance and blockchain practice in Roca Junyent. Well, we also related with all this new technology almost 10 years, and we are just assessment with any kind of project or any kind of administration who wants to launch an ICO, an SPO. And those days, everyone is talking about NFTs, so we are also linked to that. Thank you very much for your time. It's a pleasure to be here and try to help Flavio as much as we can.
Thank you. Last but not least, we got Renata out of Brazil. Please go ahead, Renata.
Hello, everyone. It's so nice to be here. I've been to Democracy for All since the first edition, and this is such a great event. I'm a judge here in Brazil, also a blockchain researcher in the Blockchain Research Institute in Brazil, a lecturer, a teacher, and I mean, it's great to be here, and I just can't wait for our panel.
Okay, so to make it very pragmatic for everyone else, since the conversation today is about the change from the rule of law to the rule of code, I made like four questions for this panel, and I'm gonna lay them out and let them address each of them answer. So the first question that I would make to them is exactly what's the approach that you have in your own jurisdiction? And let me start by Renata, who is the faraway one. And what's the perspective, what's the environment of the authorities to this approach?
Okay, so blockchain is surely disrupting law in how we think about it and how we apply law to the situations. When we think about the jurisdictions and dispute resolution, what we see the most here in Brazil are cases concerning scams. So that's not really a question that really connects to the rule of law or the rule of the code. And I think that we are going to start actually facing those matters, but we are still going to need to be able to merge the rule of law with the rule of the code. And probably we're going to get an intense feel of it as long as the disputes start emerging from the disruptions that will emerge from this new technology. And that's because the pure existence of the law or the rule of the law or the rule of the code doesn't determine people's behavior. So in that perspective, Brazil is still walking towards a regulation. So for innovators, for people who are actually trying to work in this environment, can be a little bit hard because it's insecure on legal terms, but at the same time, it's a very fertile ground for innovators to bring up these new questions, to raise these matters and make them available for everyone. So it's a very exciting time to be alive.
Thank you. Thank you. Rika out of New York, I believe she will deliver something really, the last thing.
I'll drop a bomb right now if I say that the yes has chosen the regulation by enforcement approach.
Well,
in general, I think what we've seen is the regulators and lawmakers trying to feed this new technology or even the new concepts like DAO into existing either regulatory or corporate frameworks. You've seen how the SEC has been trying to regulate the space. We've seen some initiatives like the Wyoming DAO LLC Act, and any kind of progress from the side of regulators and lawmakers in trying to understand the space and adapt new rules is great, but it's also really important to kind of take a step back and think, where are the steps really leading, right? Because when you try and take a concept like DAO and try to just squish it and, register DAO as an LLC, what's the point of having a DAO, right? We've looked at DAO so far from the perspective of corporate governance. It's great, and all the initial iterations of DAO kind of took this approach as to governance being based on the stake in certain protocol. And there was a panel here before that discussed how currently projects are trying to address this, right, and give more incentives to smaller stakeholders to vote. And that's great, but it's kind of boring, right? Why would we take DAO? Why would we take this exciting new technology and just try to cram it into the corporate code? I think the potential is much more interesting, much more broad, but so far it's taking this new exciting things and just fitting them into existing boxes. And I think it's normal because in general, technology develops much faster than regulation. Regulators have been trying quite hard to understand the technology and to learn from it. And also, it's not easy to bridge the physical and virtual world, right? So we also need to understand what it is that we're trying to regulate. Are we trying to regulate people's behavior in the digital space? Are we trying to regulate people's behavior in the physical space? And when we talk about regulation, are we talking about legislature and government imposed regulations, or we're talking about regulating relationships between counterparties, or we're talking about something like a trade association where members agree to abide by certain rules and standards. So it really depends. That's the most legal answer I could give.
As Renata said, it's exciting times. But being pragmatic, nothing better than the Dutch. And what's the approach in the Netherlands? What the Dutch government's talking about, how they are seeing the whole new thing in Holland, in Netherlands, sorry.
Well, the Netherlands is a very digitalized state, but also a state which is trying to be very compliance centered. So that makes those DAOs and all the other alternative blockchain-based solutions quite suspicious in the eyes of the regulators. The regulators want, because of course there have been some certainly unsubstantiated rumors about the Netherlands being basically a tax haven, right?
Yeah.
So they are trying to do their best to dispel those certainly baseless rumors. And they are doing that by being quite adherent to all the regulation that comes from the top, like from Brussels.
Mhm.
That's on the one hand. And on the other hand, there is lots of liberalism in the Netherlands. And so, in fact, the law is very lenient in some ways. So you have a lenient law and a very strict enforcement. I'm not from the Netherlands originally. I came there and I was very surprised how the enforcement of the law works there, even to the simplest and most close to your life points of law, like basically putting the trash in the wrong place. They just give you the fine based on an assumption. And it is the same in the financial world. So it is a bit like America, from which the culture of which stems in a large way from the Netherlands. There are barriers and you just don't go beyond them. And you even build like fences around those barriers that you don't even approach those barriers. So does this answer the question?
That's very much. And Joaquin, please.
Yeah, well, my colleagues take a great point of view from different places, from Brazil, Netherlands, and so on. I think that we're talking from the south of Europe, like Flavio and I understand it too. We are just a traditional state here in Spain. The regulator has created not only fences, they created big walls to stop that. This was a major fact that we have created alternative to that. It's a sandbox. And as other colleagues just have pointed out, that DAOs has to stay and we don't have to fit them into the traditional world because we have to adapt to amendment the regulation to create a third alternative. We got physical person, juridical person, but also we got it, these DAOs. DAOs has a new meaning. We cannot fit it in a corporate, as we already know. So we have to figure out which is the best mechanism to find out that this technology keeps evolving, keeps going on. And as my colleague pointed out too, the financial world has a stricter rules, fines if you're doing something beyond the walls. But first of all, understand that this technology is such a future that solves many problems that we got it from the past, from internet, that the internet gives us a lot of information, no matter if it's true or not, with the fake news. But with blockchain technology and DLT, we find it out new solutions, new corporation, new way of intercommunication, and a new way of relation, because we talked those days about the metaverse, because Mr. Zuckerberg said that's the future, it's centralized, but we got this 100% decentralized metaverse that we're gonna be connected. We have to understand it, which are these relationships and how it's gonna evolve, and where it has to be fine in the real world, in the virtual world, and how to mix both worlds without not creating a prejudice between one to another.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point, because that will lead for the next question that I wrote them. And if you notice, the 4 different approaches, but very confusing, all of them. Nobody knows what to do, and everybody's looking at each other to see what's going to be the best practice before they actually issue a new law. So again, if code is whole, would you accept to bind your clients to this approach independently of the fact that the result could go against him or against your local laws? We have 4 nationalities, 4 jurisdictions. And maybe you are in a smart contract that's going to use a law that you don't know in a jurisdiction that you've never been. So very briefly, each of you, starting by you now, Joaquin, how do you feel this? How would you reckon that you would tell people,
well,
bind yourself?
I'm trying to aim every single entrepreneur that is working with this technology and have a technical solution, because at the end, technology, it's at least law. No matter, sometimes here in Spain, it's not possible because tokenization is not clarified or ruled, but we can find it out other jurisdictions where you can do that. So the first thing that I said is, please work on the technology, make that your project is viable, try to understand that this is a solution on a virtual world, and then find out which is the best place to set up the company or set up everything. And sometimes you have to move from, I don't know, from Singapore, create the vehicle in Singapore, and then moving to, I don't know, to Qatar, and following, do the seller in the States. So we try to figure out that we are more or less around the 80s of the internet. We are in the beginnings. We have to find solutions for our clients, and we cannot chop their legs. And the first step is say, no, you don't do that. Because if you want to evolve, if you want to increase and you want to create something new, you cannot say no. You can say here, not today, maybe tomorrow, but find out a solution for the entrepreneurs.
Well, you might. Would you accept that? Would you bind your client and take the smart contract as the whole for that, or for the execution of that contract, independently of the fact that it would go against the Dutch law? Would you accept that?
Well, a contract, according to Dutch law and according to basically any law in Europe or in America, is something which the parties understand and which they agree upon. So in that sense, it is a contract. It is a contract in the Netherlands. It would be a contract in other countries. It is a contract which is not humanly readable, but there are ways how to read it. So in that way, there is no difference between the smart contract and the non-smart contract, except that it has a great volume. And so it has great risk factors, but it also has great opportunities because it minimizes the risk factors of the traditional contracts, where it is very easy to interpret once you have the software, once you're putting it on the right platform, and once you have the right knowledge about what is actually agreed upon. So that's like minimizing that risk, but because it's so smooth and so simple to understand, it is prone to be multiplicized. So one smart contract can be, in fact, 20,000 contractual relationships. And then that's a bit of a problem for anyone who tries to make sense of it for the purpose of regulation, interpretation, adjudication, and all kinds of other agents.
So, as I said, very pragmatic approach that everything is the same, just do as the contract says. In America, please.
In America, I guess I wouldn't dream of telling my clients what to do. My job is actually to lay out options for them.
Yes.
And lay out certain risks associated with each option to understand what their business model is and the business objective, and then talk with the team through various risks they will be taking on if they go one way or another, right? So smart contracts currently, as I understand them, and again, I'm usually the dumbest person in the room and very happy to be so. They're quite basic currently. It's more of a if-then relationship, right?
Exactly.
And even with the if-then relationship, my question would be, well, first of all, what is actually the underlying technology for the smart contract? What are you trying to achieve? If we are doing a basic transaction where some money is put in escrow, and if a certain condition happens, money is released from escrow, right? What is there a technology risk? So my job actually to ask a lot of questions and then say, well, look, you could go this way, but these are the risks. Or you could go the other way and these are the risks, and I'll be happy to talk through each option and try to figure out. Unfortunately, there is no silver bullet, right?
Yeah. I wish there was. And you, Renata, how the Brazilians would play this samba?
Well, first of all, I can't advise any clients because I'm a judge. So on the perspective that if a smart contract is an actual contract, because it may not be always a contract. If the smart contract is an actual contract and for by any means it's dealing with illicit objects or things like that, that wouldn't be able to produce an effect or to be enforceable by the justice system. So that's one perspective of it. There's
May-
something else.
May I
Yeah.
interrupt to you? Enjoying the fact that you are a judge,
Yeah,
let's make the question all the way around. As a judge, would you take this? Would you take a smart contract and execute a court record issued in the United States, Netherlands, or here in Spain, in Brazil? However, that smart contract is against the Brazilian law.
Wow.
well,
That's
No.
that's a hard question, I know.
no, the thing is, if the smart contract has the prerequisites of a contract,
The cause and the object and the clause.
and if the object is licit, the parts can fully understand the terms and things like that. If it meets the requirements, then it can be enforceable. But if it doesn't, it won't be enforceable. That's pretty much intuitive, right? But what really gets me is like for when we talk about DAOs, for instance, we've seen like a great speech from Gordon, which actually brought the concept of DAO and usually how this concept is actually misleading in various situations nowadays. So how can we actually enforce a smart contract that may be empowering a DAO on a universe that can't understand what a DAO is? Because when law tries to figure out a DAO, like what happened in Wyoming with the LLCs, they are trying to actually enforce something and to welcome something into what already exists, even though that's not really enough, or that actually doesn't fit exactly what we're seeing. So bringing law and technology together is not an easy task. But when we come to enforcing contracts, we just have to check if there are the requirements. If the object is not licit, it won't be enforceable. And that can be a problem for everyone.
That's a good approach as well, because by the end of the day, if you are to execute court record, you're gonna end it up on a court. And the two last questions that I have over here, because of the time, I will ask you guys to be very, not brief, but just straight to the point there. Would you encourage your client, not your case, Renata, your client to accept a hybrid contract or hybrid system where in some cases, the industry today, especially the insurance, employment laws, and minor crimes, can be solved by a smart contract, whereas other issues cannot. So from your personal perspective and professional experience, would you be inclined to live in as we're living today, digital and real? Would you encourage your client to play both legal systems or legal words in a way, knowing that the consequence maybe will have an effect on a different jurisdiction? Or would you play safe and say, look, stay here or go there? I mean, I'm not answering this time, so I can shoot. Sorry for this. Mike first. Yeah, please.
Well, the question, like the answer would be, I will kind of answer with the question. It depends on what type of hybrid contract it is. What are the hybrid elements, right? But in general, the answer would be yes, but yes, but.
And, if then that.
Yeah, if then that. Well, that would be more the nature of the contract. Then, if then, but the issue is whether it's clear, understandable, what the content is, if it's fair, if it's like how the enforcement looks like, because usually the enforceability is not an issue, because a pure smart contract usually enforces itself. It's kind of the judge, the attorney, and the bailiff all at once in the code, right? Through the code. Now we are talking about hybrid contracts, so I have to see which element is missing, if any. And for example, in my Liberlander hat and not Netherlander hat, we are trying to create solutions which are as much full smart contracts as possible, but then with elements of the outside world. So for example, if you have some kind of a dispute resolution, which is a smart contract in itself, and it ends in a verdict, and that verdict is not on chain for our blockchain, but it would be about Bitcoins or dollars, then the verdict will be translated by an algorithm, we still have to make it, into a normal contract with words, right? And then the judge, even in Brazil, would be able to clearly identify the object and clearly adjudicate the issue. Does this answer your question?
Very much. If you're not familiar, dispute resolution is ADR, alternative dispute resolution systems. One means that you solve your case outside of the court. Okay, so the DAOs by themselves can become one of those if they are furnished with smart contract. So, Rika?
Yeah, I think I've been living in this hybrid world for quite a while now, and we do a lot of it with various project sponsors and startups. It really depends on the project, but let's say you have someone that's trying to digitize traditional securities, right?
Yeah.
And they're trying to issue and distribute it, and they want to avail themselves to one of the exemptions from registration with our regulator. Well, if you're using one of the exemptions from registration, there are certain compliance requirements that you need to satisfy. When you have this interest, when these interests are represented by code, they're digital, you can actually build in the compliance into the code. So a lot of the work that we do is talking with projects through what should be built in the digital asset in order to satisfy the compliance requirements.
That was a very good answer for understanding the complexity of the question underlying here, which is exactly this, the compliance with a lot of things. Why should a judge deny in the execution of that court record? But
yeah,
here in Spain, man.
I think that Fernanda said before, if there's an object, both parts agreed on that, and they understood the code, could be called as law. No matter of that, we have to understand too that in certain regulation, it's necessary, for example, to proceed with the purchase of a building due to a public deed. So it's not be possible to create 100% smart contract. I love the concept of Ricardian contract, that's 150% smart contract, 50% a legal contract, because I truly believe that the smart contract will be really useful, for example, in international commerce, where the bill of lading could be totally substituted by a smart contract that will certify each of the steps. But in case there's any problematic that it falls before an administration or before a court, it will be really useful that say, okay, the payment will be proceeded with a smart contract, but it's linked to a traditional contract which have all the obligations, all the duty, all the guarantees related to that. That will be easier for the church and for the court to understand it, to create a best solution. And once this smart contract evolves and could be adapted due to oracles like Chainlink, that will be easier for all of us, than not only for our colleagues said, for certain projects, central regulation could be 100% virtually. I think that could be used for generally, but we have to have the second hand totally covered in case before the judge.
Well, yeah, before make the last question is going to be a little bit of a game because you got a judge and 3 lawyers. So we're going to enjoy the time. What Joaquin was saying in between the lines as well is sometimes you're not going to get what you want out of the court. In other words, being the contract itself, the smart contract itself, if let me make this other question before we run out of time. The last question is, let's say we have a court record, just like an arbitration, that you have an award, and you don't like it, the result of it. So since we have here honor, let's say that those 3 people here, those 3 professionals, take to a court a similar case where a smart contract is being challenged on court because it's applying a different law, which means that according to what you're saying before, we lawyers, what do? We follow shopping the best law for our clients. So sometimes you are going to end up in a court in Brazil with like the new franchising law in Brazil that allows you to include in your contract the Spanish law. So you, Renata, might be deciding franchising contract based on our law here in Spain, which is absolutely crazy. but that's exactly what a smart contract can do to you if you didn't know. So the first question before the judge says it's verdict, would you challenge a resolution in your home country or abroad because the smart contract does not satisfy your client's needs or wishes?
So we're talking about jurisdiction shopping.
And
Yeah.
and accepting or not what we have coded before. If the code is a rule, you should not go to court.
Well,
And I never see people doing this. They always have
look,
arbitration.
I'll answer in everyone's favorite way. It depends.
Hard question. Hard question.
What do the parties to this contract signed on to? Did they agree that any disputes could be resolved in a certain jurisdiction and in a certain venue? Did they agree that this would be the final resolution? Did they agree that the resolution could be challenged, right? And a lot of times, if we're talking about smart contract, still at their they're still at the very basic level. It's sort of the if then. So I can't imagine currently people not being able to challenge execution of a smart contract in traditional court. And you have to think where the counterpart is allocated. And if you're being the seller of a digital asset, your location is irrelevant. It really matters usually where you sell into, right?
Exactly. That's exactly what most
So
of you.
that's a longer way to say it depends.
Yeah, exactly. But that's most of you are doing today. We are running out of time now.
Okay.
Please, you might address this as you can.
Well, I will try to answer. Basically, there is no infinite possibility of forum hopping. So there should be some reason why they have chosen, why it is possible to actually hop from one jurisdiction to another. Usually it's a very small list of jurisdiction based on, for example, the country of residence of the defendant or something like that. Now, whether I would do it, the law is about human interaction between intelligent and kind of determined actors. And that interaction makes the law interesting and also better and better and better and iterate better. So if there is such a loophole, I would find it moral and good and certainly good for my relationship with the client to use it because I'm using the law intelligently and I'm being a part of the great story of the law's ever improving evolution, basically.
Okay.
Agreed what they have said. It's true. You kind of assess your client the best way and try to figure out which is the best jurisdiction for this transaction. If they find out one jurisdiction that they agreed on that, of course, if it's possible an arbitration, it's better for that. And try to avoid courts at least in these early days. Maybe in 10 or 15 years, code is law and most codes are acceptable, but going to the judge and explain what's, I don't know, an e-commerce contract could be a nightmare. Don't think about it to explain what's DLT technology, what's blockchain, and we call it this code solidity. That's lovely, but it's everything it's ruled with that and no other clauses, and that will be a nightmare, I think. So that will be better to find out a middle grade solution for that.
And last but not least, listen to the judge hammering the desk. Would you dismiss those cases or would you take it?
No, well, it depends.
Like everything else. But very briefly.
Yes, but it does. It happens already, right? It's not because of blockchain technology or code is law. It already happens with several kind of cases, different cases. So it really depends. It really depends.
As you see, you need some lawyers here to help you out how to draft those smart contracts, how to figure out where you should be going in case of things go wrong, and we have to study more than one legal system and many more laws than what you are familiar with at the moment. Thank you all for coming. Hope you enjoyed the show and see you around. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.